Before we go back to the topic of yesterday, I want to give you a couple of quotes. Evangelism 669.2. Evangelism 670.1. CE 197.2. Desire of Ages 253. It's just a collection of quotes that I want to paraphrase briefly for us. I'm going to read the first quote, and then in the subsequent quotes I will paraphrase somewhat. 669.2, Book Evangelism. She says, speaking from the throat, letting the words come out from the upper extremity of the vocal organs, all the time fretting and irritating them is not the best way to preserve health or to increase the efficiency of those organs. You should take a full inspiration and let the action come from the abdominal muscles. Let the lungs be only the channel, but do not depend upon them to do the work. If you let your words come from deep down, exercising the abdominal muscles, you can speak to thousands with just as much ease as you can speak to 10 people. Do any of us feel like we talk as if we could as easily speak to a crowd of 2,000 people as to 10 people? Do you think that's you? So we all have some work to do. I'll put my hand up for that. Next quote. Ministers should stand erect and speak slowly, firmly, and distinctly. Taking a full inspiration of air at every sentence and throwing out the words by exercising the abdominal muscles. If they will observe this simple rule, giving attention to the laws of health in other respects, they may preserve their life and usefulness much longer than men in any other profession. The chest will become broader, and the speaker need seldom become hoarse, even by constant speaking. CE 197.2, she's talking about Christ as a teacher. When Jesus spoke, it was not with hesitating uncertainty. His words came with an earnestness and assurance appropriate to their importance and the momentous consequences involved in their reception or rejection. When his doctrines were opposed, he defended them with so great a zeal and certainty as to impress his hearers that he would die, if need be, to sustain the authority of his teachings. It's in Gospel Workers. While Jesus' teaching was simple, he spoke as one having authority. The characteristics set his teaching in contrast with that of all others. The rabbis spoke with doubt and hesitancy, as if the scriptures might be interpreted to mean one thing or exactly the opposite. The hearers were daily involved in greater uncertainty, but Jesus taught the scriptures as of unquestionable authority. Whatever his subject, it was presented with power, as if his words could not be controverted. I wanted to bring this up now because we are 2 weeks now through the school. We're halfway through the school. And this is a broad generalization. I know it's not so in every case. But as I expected and as I see in most other countries in the movement, we have this issue where women are starting to speak who've been taught from a young age, from the time they're children, that their families, their parents, prospective husbands, men, communities, like them to speak doubtingly, quietly, without confidence, that to project their voice is somehow wrong for a woman to do. And while it's a generalization, generally, the men in this classroom can speak with confidence, can project, and generally, the women in this classroom speak as if they're apologizing for talking at all. And 2 weeks into the school, even if it's hard to actually put the change of practice into action, at least know in your own minds why you speak the way you do. And that if you're a teacher, as every woman here is who's taking a worship service and will go home and teach, then isn't Jesus our example? And didn't he speak with authority? He projected his voice and he spoke with authority. And for a woman to speak with authority goes against not just our own culture. It doesn't just go against our culture. It puts us up where people will attack us because people don't like it. There's men in this room who won't like it. They won't even know they won't like it, but they'll take you down for it. So you need to speak with authority, even if it puts your neck out, even if it's difficult. Whether that's responding to questions or taking a worship service, be aware of that. The legacy of slavery did not end in 1863. The mindset hadn't ended, and all the legacy issues of it still existed. The fundamental practice was gone. The hard work hadn't even begun. And we're in the same position with sexism. The mindset, by and large, for most of the movement has not changed. And the legacy issues are mostly still in existence. That's the hard work we need to do. And it's not just with the men changing their mindset. It's also with the women practicing to project your voice, speaking with authority, reteaching how you speak, speaking from the abdominal muscles, not being apologetic for speaking. All of those things are something the sisters have to be putting into practice as you answer questions, as you take worship services. I have difficulty speaking naturally. I have since I was a child. Just the action of speaking isn't easy for me. Nothing to do with nerves, just lung mechanics. But it's something we can work on and improve. And I'd like us to think about that over the last half of this school. It's not just a problem here, it's a problem across the world. So it's something across the world that's going to take decided effort to change. So that was just an introduction because we're halfway through. And I want us to keep this in mind through all our future worship services and classes. So we'll come back to our topic. We'll come back to our discussion of the counterfeit. So we went through the history of modern Israel. We traced that from 1798 through, we haven't gone to the Second Advent, but we've touched on the histories of the Alpha history of the Millerites and come into the history of the 144,000. We compared and contrasted Israel and Babylon. We did that in ancient Israel, ancient Babylon. Now we're looking at the history where ancient Babylon, still that history of the Dark Ages, it goes into apostasy and then it dies. And we know that when it resurrects, it's going to resurrect as modern Babylon. So our discussion then is, what is modern Babylon? What resurrects? Is modern Babylon the apostate Protestant churches? Or is modern Babylon a resurrection, new form of the papacy? So we have, I think as far as a class goes, many of us are on different sides of that spectrum, some in the middle, some leaning strongly one way or another. So I want to go to a quote in The Great Controversy. I'll remind us of Spalding and McGann, 1.4. And what did this quote tell us?
The mother has died, now it's time for the daughters to come instead.
That wasn't the point we laboured over. Well, that's correct.
That the mother and the daughter are separate and distinct.
That the mother and daughters are separate and distinct. We all remember that?
Yes.
Separate and distinct entities. And then we looked at how, while the mother is declining in power, the daughters had been growing. So the mother, we could say, declining in power from 1798 to 1799, but she says declining in power as present tense. I saw that as the mother has been declining in power. So that, and we talked about the loss of the Papal States in 1869, 1870, how for about 100 years the papacy was suffering, declining in power. in that same history, Protestantism was growing stronger and stronger in the United States. So I want to go to another quote. We'll go to the Great Controversy. Great Controversy 578.3. Great Controversy 578.3. First of all, she's going to talk about the lamb-like beast. The beast with lamb-like horns that causes the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the papacy. They're symbolized by the beast like unto a leopard. So she's talking about two beasts. There's the lamb-like beast and then there's the leopard-like beast. Can we see that? Two beasts. The beast with two horns is to say to them that dwell on the earth that they should make an image to the beast. And furthermore, it is to command all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive the mark of the beast. It has been shown that the United States is the power represented by the beast with lamb-like horns, and that this prophecy will be fulfilled when the United States shall enforce Sunday observance, which Rome claims as a special acknowledgement of her supremacy. But in this homage to the papacy, the United States will not be alone. So she's lining up two beasts, lamb-like beast, leopard-like beast. Is that okay? She says the influence of Rome in the countries that once acknowledged her dominion is still far from being destroyed, and prophecy foretells a restoration of her power. So two beasts, lamb-like beast, leopard-like beast. The leopard-like beast, the papacy, has not completely lost her influence in the countries that once acknowledged her dominion. What countries once acknowledged her dominion? Europe. And prophecy foretells a restoration of her power. Whose power? Can we all see that? Prophecy foretells a restoration of papal power. Protestantism is a horn on the lamb-like beast. She's not speaking about that beast. She's speaking about the leopard-like beast. Then she goes to quote Revelation, I saw one of his heads as it was wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. The infliction of the deadly wound points to the downfall of the papacy in 1798. After this, says the prophet, his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. Paul states plainly that the man of sin will continue until the second advent. The very close of time he will carry forward the work of deception. And the Revelator declares, also referring to the papacy, all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him whose names are not written in the book of life. So who is John referring to when he talks about the resurrection? The papacy. In both the Old and the New World, the papacy will receive homage in the honour paid to the Sunday institution that rests solely upon the authority of the Roman Catholic Church. So she states clearly in the Great Controversy that the resurrection is the papacy. Can we all see that? So if we were going to go to the history of the Great Controversy, A.T. Jones gives us 3 Sunday laws, 3 significant dates. What are they? Sister Elizabeth. In Millerite history, early Adventist history, A.T. Jones gives us 3 dates. Relating to Sunday. Church and state. 1888? There's 2 more. 1850 wasn't an issue of Sunday observance. So 1850 would be going back to, you know how we have 3 models. We have Millerite history, that's the history of 1850. And for this one we have early writings. Then we have 1888. For this one we have the Great Controversy. And this history plus this history equals 144,000 Sunday law history. Does that sound familiar? So if you go to 1850, you're going to the early writings version. I'm looking purely into this history, when A.D. Jones is fighting against church and state in America. And for this history, the escalation to it and past it, he gives 3 dates. Sister Joy, do you know that? So 1863, 1893. 1863, 1888, 1893. Are we all familiar with that? So 1863 is when the national reform movement started, that had the intention of uniting church and state and introducing these laws. 1888 we mark as a Sunday law, and 1893 is it Boston World Fair? Chicago World Fair. So those are our 3 dates. So if Sunday had have been enforced in America in this history, who did that work? Papacy or Protestantism? So if I was to mark this as a Sunday law, you're happy that this is the work of Protestantism. Despite that being the work of Protestantism, does she allow the resurrection of the papacy to be that Protestantism? No. Can we all see that? That the resurrection of the papacy, even in the 1888 history, did not mean that the papacy did that work. Protestantism did that work in the United States of enforcing the Sunday law. So why then is she talking about the resurrection of the papacy? Does anyone still hold to the idea that the resurrection is apostate Protestantism? Anyone still holding to that idea? Or are we in agreement?
What do you mean by that? I don't understand.
Which part of that?
The question that you are asking.
Yesterday, people were saying that the resurrection of the beast referred to the work of apostate Protestantism, and the papacy has little to no role. I'm asking if anyone still believes that. So we go to 1888 history, and Ellen White is clearly saying that the Revelator, John, when writing the book of Revelation, is referring to the papacy as the one that is resurrected and worshipped. She states that clearly in the Great Controversy.
I think he's stating that it is worship through the image. Once you worship the image, you have already worshipped the beast.
She tells us that there is 2 entities, separate and distinct. Papacy, separated from Protestantism. She says that this is the lamb-like beast, and she says this is the leopard-like beast. We're okay so far. And then she says, in the history of 1888, who enforced the Sunday law? So this side is going to bring in a Sunday law. And then as we go through this quote of Great Controversy, she says, the influence of Rome, of this beast, of the papacy, in Europe, is far from ended, and prophecy foretells a restoration of her power. So how can you make a restoration of her power, the papacy, when her influence is not dead, this power?
When her image is produced, or when her image is made. Because when my image is made and it's alive, then I'm already there. You cannot look for me again when my image is there. So it's still to me, though it is my image. Because if papacy is there personally, there is no need of image.
Then why include the papacy in this at all? Why say that the papacy still has an influence? Because she's not talking about Protestant influence and projecting that onto the papacy. She's saying the papacy has her own influence. Why include that? She's not projecting any of this from Protestantism onto the papacy. She's separated them. And she's saying the papacy still has an influence. It's far from ended, and prophecy shows a restoration of her power.
I believe that in the work of the Protestants, impose and the law, still Catholics, they have influence there in order to let Protestants get the influence. Like you can see in our line, more majority are being supported by the Catholics, isn't it? We can show that in the history. So
They're not being supported by Francis. They're not being supported by the papacy.
Catholics members, they are there.
They have independent Catholics. They do not have the Pope. They do not have the power of the Catholic Church. So, the moral majority, Protestantism in the United States, is not being supported by the papacy. And they're not projecting any power onto the papacy. But I don't want us to use that argument, because when we start doing that, we turn into newspaper prophets. I want us to see that in the quote, because the quote tells us that.
Yeah, I think even so we don't have any evidence that in the history of Rome from 638-93 the Catholic in any way was involved. I believe what Sister White has written and the evidence we have is that that was purely the work of the National Reform Movement, which is Protestants. So I don't think in any way they were being influenced by the Catholics, as you said.
The Catholics didn't do this work, so was Protestantism. Any other thoughts? Brother Rogers.
Yesterday we read a quote from Spalding and Mother. She was portraying this point that while the mother is going down, the daughters are coming up. So I don't know how we conceptualize this quote, because Ellen White also lived in a real world. So she had a real life experience. When you look at the book of Damstig, I think you identified that in some classes ago. If you trace the history from 1733 until 63, the relationship between Catholics and Protestants was not very good. That's why in the United States they begin to attack them. I think even in 1844 they attacked them. They have a chapter called The Air of Good Feeling and The Air of Bad Feeling, when Protestants are so suspicious of Catholics. So from what she was observing, she was seeing that it's not possible that Catholics and Protestants can work together with the environment existing. But when it comes to the 1888 history, she begins to notice a change, that there was a possibility that they would begin working together. And then when we come to our history, we see them separate and distinct, but we know at some point we don't know if they are going to work together based on the models we develop. So that's why I say, if you look at the quotation, you cannot get that quotation and project it literally to the future. So if we did that for Spalding, the man who speaks the history of 50 to 63, I could also take the 1888 one and bring it to the future and say, see, Catholics have a part to play. So I don't think it's fair to say that because of that quotation we don't see Catholics having a work to do at the end of the world.
Thank you, Brother Rogers. One more Great Controversy quote. Great Controversy 441.2. Keep your finger in the old quote because we haven't finished with it. Great Controversy 441.2. But the beast with lamb-like horns spake as a dragon. So she's talking about two beasts. Lamb-like beast, spake as a dragon, and exerciseth all the power of the first beast before him. So how many beasts? Lamb-like beast, first beast. And causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship thee, first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. So what beast is healed? First beast. Can we see separate and distinct? So we come back to our quote above, 578.3. When she says the influence of Rome has not been completely destroyed, and prophecy foretells a restoration of her power, Is she speaking about some type of projected power from Protestantism? My brother would say yes. Do you have this quote? The influence of Rome, the papacy, is far from being destroyed. And there's people here who are saying that the only role, the only power the papacy has is through some type of projected power from Protestantism. So Jerry Falwell's going to do something, Trump is going to do something, and somehow that gives glory to the papacy. Not because the papacy has any power, but because Protestantism is enacting the forms that the papacy used to keep. My brother.
I think if I understand the quotation well, then what he's saying is that that influence of papacy has not been destroyed from the nations that once worked with her. So he's not talking of the influence on the United States, but the influence on the nation that has once worked with the papacy. So he's talking in relationship to the Sunday issue. So if the Protestantism is going to bring the Sunday, then that influence is also going to be done by papacy in Europe again. Because those nations that once believe in our power will still believe the influence of papacy. And it is an homage that when the United States is doing that, it is a homage to a papacy. They are giving homage in repeating what was done in the old world.
But can you see that they're separate and distinct?
Yeah, they're separate.
Protestantism rising up and enacting the Sunday law is not the healing of the deadly wound. You're okay with that? People are not okay with that. Which beast was wounded, which beast was healed? In Great Controversy 578.3, whose power is restored? Papacy or Protestantism? My brother. Just answer that question. Whose power is restored? Papacy or Protestantism?
The power is restored. It's like when I understand the Greece.
Papacy or Protestantism? Not the explanation.
None of it.
So no power is restored. She says the wound is healed, power is restored.
Because I don't understand Greece to be such only.
We haven't got into a definition of what power restored means. But you know it's church and state. My brother.
Okay. What I want to ask, maybe people say there is reason why I had a lot of questions, but it's what I want to understand. Because what you have put there, you have put papacy, leopard beast, then the other one is lamb. So what I want to understand, we know that the other beast or the first beast is going restricted, and we know that it was papacy with European king. Does it mean that the European king they are going to come at the end, like how they were acting in the period of 1260 with papacy?
I don't want to go into what it looks like. What we're in danger of doing is turning into newspaper prophets. It's like, if I can't put my finger in the wound and feel it, you're not real. It's like if I can't see it in the news, the way my mind pictures it, it's not real. I want us to see what the quotes tell us is going to happen.
But if we address those quite according to their content, because we know that they were not written for our period.
They are written for our period. This is written for our period, and this is written for our period.
Are we taking it literally or we take it as parable?
We take it as a parable, but that doesn't mean it's not written for our period.
Then if it is parable, then it's not going to be the same way.
No, this isn't going to be slavery in the United States. But we still have to take this plus this. So what she says in this quote is still relevant for our period. We can't discount it unless we have a very strong reason to do so. And I think that's where people are tripping. They think that they can say 1888 history, the papacy might have been restored. Maybe the papacy had a role in an actual Sunday law, but we can't apply that to our own time, and I want to know why not. Because even in 1888 history, a Sunday law like we would have, millions of Adventists are expecting this Sunday law, yes? Just like it would have been in 1888 history. You all expected that a year ago. And when you expected that a year ago, did you expect the papacy to have a role in it? I think you did. At least 99% of the movement did, and what changed that? Increase of knowledge of the Sunday law, and what did we say? All we did was highlight this. And what we have a problem doing in the movement is holding two concepts at the same time. I keep repeating that. I know it's hard because I find it hard. It's one of the hardest things I find to do. Holding two seemingly contradictory statements and seeing them both as correct. And because we say, look at all of this Trump and Jerry Falwell that's leading to the Sunday law, all of a sudden, all of us who knew the papacy was going to be resurrected think that now this is irrelevant. And I want to know what our justification is for doing that. Because if we went to 1888 history, as it would have been in 1888, you can clearly see that Protestantism was the one that enacted the Sunday law, would have done that work. And yet Ellen White still says that the resurrection and the healing of the deadly wound is the papacy, not Protestantism. My brother at the back.
So I'd like to take up the quote that he gave us yesterday. It's valid and Madden 1.4. So in that quote, we have identified that the mother and the daughter are different and distinct and separate. And when you look at that quote, there are other words which have been added. It says that the mother, the daughters were the next to come on stage. So that means the mother already had hit a stage and it's past. So we have the mother, the daughter coming on the stage. And what she had to say that when the daughter she's on stage, she's going to act on the same mind that the mother did what? Had. So my question is, what is the mind of the mother which the daughter are going to do what? To enforce. Because if the daughter is on stage, what actually the daughter is going to do is to come with the same mind that the mother had. And I'm trying to define how this mind looks like. And I'm reading from, allow me just to quote that one quotation from The True Republican by A.T. Jones. And you can write TTR 5.3.
TT, what, sorry?
The True Republican, TTR 5, paragraph 2. And he said, the principles of Rome is the abject slavery of the mind. The principles of the United States of America is the absolute freedom of the mind. So what I'm saying, if the daughter is going to come on stage, what they're going to do, they're going to have slavery of the mind. There's no freedom. But it's us now because we have been told that they are different and distinct. So we need to conceptualize, to identify how does this slavery of the mind look like when the papacy is on stage, behaving like the mother. Not necessarily how the mother was behaving in her history, but we must see this principle of slavery of the mind with the daughter. Because if you go to 1888, it is not the mother who is saying the first Sunday, it's the daughter. But their problem, they are slavery in the mind of the people, just like the papacy was doing before 16.
So it's about the slavery of the mind. That's your point? So she's writing in this history. She's saying that the papacy is declining in power and Protestantism is growing in power, yes? Come into 1888 history, and she says Protestantism still in power, going to enact a Sunday law. Separate and distinct from Protestantism is the papacy. Protestantism will give homage to the papacy through its actions, but it's the papacy that has not lost its influence and will resurrect. That's just a direct reading. Brother Dennis.
So according to how I am understanding you, as you are trying to explain GC 578 to us, so if you come and read this quote and understand the mindset of Ellen White, she's trying to say that as she addresses the 1888 history, that you have the papacy and you have Protestantism. And the issue is the Sunday law, Sunday sacredness. And that was a history that fulfilled in her time. So if we have to bring that history, as you're saying that we have to understand that story as a parable and bring it into our history, the principle we must see the papacy again, we must see Protestantism again, but now how the literal history fulfills is different. The version of the Sunday law we are expecting is a different one, but the two entities must be present.
All we've changed is our definition of what that Sunday law is.
Yes,
We've changed nothing else
exactly. We have to see the two entities as we saw them in Ellen White's time.
because it's 1 + 2 = 3. Going back to Great Controversy 578, the influence of Rome in the countries that once acknowledged her dominion is still far from being destroyed, and prophecy foretells a restoration of her power. So, my brother, whose power is restored?
I understand that the power being restored.
Not an explanation. Who does she say? Who does Ellen White tell us has a restoration of power?
It's the power of papacy. I don't deny that.
So, if I have a restoration of my power, you think giving power to Joy restores my power?
If joy is your representative, then it is your power that is restored.
That's not what she says. It's a restoration of her power, not through proxy.
But in the same what she's saying, that the same mind of the mother is going to be played by who? And the mind is the power.
So if Joy is my daughter and she has the same mindset as I do, that doesn't mean she restores my power. That means you have two mindsets. My brother.
My question is, who is restoring this power? Is it the daughters or the mother herself?
Who is restored?
Who is restoring the power?
Who do you believe receives the restoration of power? So you're okay with that?
I'm okay with that. But who is doing the
I'm not really concerned about who does the work. I want us to see whose power is restored. My brother.
Yeah, there is a point we discussed yesterday with Brother Rogers. So concerning Revelation chapter 13, verse 14. So when you go to 13:14, so we have a dragon. So and this dragon, so is making some miracle in the size of the beast. So and he is forming the whole world so that they should make an image of the what? Of the beast. So what I wish to know here is that, so if the image of the beast is separate from the beast, and is beast the restricted beast or the one who was there?
All I want to know is how you read that sentence, because she's very clear.
Yeah.
The influence of Rome, it's been damaged, she's declined in power, but it's not gone, and her power will be restored.
Yeah, I understand that. But
That restoration of power is the papacy. So she has power in the 1260. She loses that power is restored. So that is not Protestantism's power, that's her power. Yes?
I agree with that.
So it's the papacy whose deadly wound is healed at the end of the world, not the actions of Protestantism.
Yeah, what I want to know only is verse 13. In verse 14 we have dragons, we have the beast, and the image of the beast. Are these three, is this distinct from the image? Or is this equal to the image? Because I think we discussed yesterday with Brother Rogers, so we came to a certain conclusion.
I'm not interested in that. I want us to see that the papacy is restored. Because a year ago, everyone would have agreed that this Sunday law, the enforcement of Sunday keeping, would have come through Protestantism, but the papacy is restored at the end of the world. Everyone knew that. All Adventists know that. And then in changing our definition of what this Sunday law looks like, people have looked externally, seen Jerry Falwell and Donald Trump and the moral majority. They've seen with their eyes in newspapers that it doesn't seem like Pope Francis is on their side, And instead of just changing the Sunday law issue, they've wiped the papacy out of end time prophecy. And I want to know how they went from step 1 to step 2. Because the great controversy doesn't let you do that. And we all know that the great controversy is just as relevant for our history as early writings. How was that step taken, my brother?
Okay, I was happy with the concept of my brother, which he said that in that history where Sister White was talking, there's this and there's Protestant. And the interesting thing there was about Sunday. So, and what we take all those three, and what we just change is the nature of how that Sunday will look like, right? But I was like, the same power which allowed us to do that, I think it can allow the still to deny papacy at this time. Because we are not taking the same, we are not taking the same concept of which Sister White has wrote. Because we know the real interest of papacy is Sunday, is the Sunday keeping, of which we don't see that.
No, it's not. They have many interests. It's not all Sunday keeping. I disagree with you there.
Yeah, but according to the context of Sister White, I think that is the interest.
So you can change the context. You can go to quotes that say slavery is an institution of Satan and is a remnant of the papacy. You can go to quotes and show that.
Yeah, by saying it,
and our brother talked about her mindset. It's more than Sunday keeping. It's like saying, well, it mustn't be the United States anymore either.
yeah, okay, what I was saying, that was the main role which Sister White was saying that papacy is planning, or that was...
No, she says that's coming through Protestantism. The Sunday law in the United States would have come through Protestantism. And yet the papacy resurrects. So now we understand that inequality is coming through Protestantism. And yet the papacy resurrects. The people deny part 2. Brother Robert, your turn.
I was just wondering if you read verse 12,
Of what chapter?
chapter 13. Speaking of this dragon, the Mr. Maiden speaks like a dragon, it says, and he exercises all the power of the first beast before him. This word before means in front of, in the presence of. So it will give the impression that both of these beasts are there. And it's not really the sense of one beast acting the role of the other one. The other one is directed. Both of them are there. That's what I'm saying.
So before can have a couple of different meanings.
Yeah.
Before can mean behind in the past. And if I'm before you, as I am now, it can also mean that I'm right in front of you and you can see me. And when you go into the Greek, what Brother Robert is saying is that word before means in the face of or in front of. So the red pen is before the black pen. Doesn't mean that it's prior in prior history, it means that it's facing. They're before each other, that's your point. So both beasts facing each other, can see each other. Yeah, verse 14 in the side of the beast, both beasts. One beast died yet, yes? Papacy, that beast died. So how can it be in the sight of it? If you're dead, you can't see. It's resurrected, and what's this beast? This is lamb-like beast, what's this one? Papacy. My brother.
Okay, what I want to do is, I want to quote you. And what I want to quote is what you did in September 2019. So,
Just be accurate with your quote.
yeah. So what you did, you were doing the study on New World Order. And what you showed that you show here you having United States, and United States want to be, as a state want to be ahead of the other nation. Then you also show that Protestant, they want to be ahead of the other churches. So what do you mean by that?
How does that relate to this study?
So how it is related, because you see this is the state and this is the church, and this is what we are arguing here.
I don't see how that changes our definition of anything.
Then what, because I think what I'm saying is not, the one which is going to deal with United States is the Protestant, but though purpose is going to be restricted, then it's not the one who is going to do the work.
I've never said it does the work of enforcing this Sunday law. I've said it's the one that's resurrected, and that's what people are saying is incorrect. Anyone new who hasn't spoken yet? What do I have thought? Can I tell you what I think we do? You've all heard me say, just first of all tell me if you agree with it. Ellen White dressed according to the dispensation that she lived in. You all believe that? I'll erase this. So we teach Ellen White dressed to her dispensation. And you all agree with that concept. FFA says she did not dress according to dispensation. Do any of you agree with that? I heard some yeses. Who agrees with this one? Raise your hand. Who agrees with this one? I do. I agree with this one. This is us. This is FFA. Who's right and who's wrong? No. Because we don't teach this. We don't teach this. We teach both. Ellen White dressed according to her dispensation, yes? It's equally right to say that she did not dress according to her dispensation. She wore skirts and dresses because that was dressing according to her dispensation. We can see that. Did she wear hoop skirts and corsets? No, so she did not dress according to her dispensation. The reformed dress was not the normal dress for a dispensation. It was strange for them. Can you see how both contradictory statements are correct? FFA has taken this side and they're absolute on this side. This is the only thing they're willing to accept. She did not dress according to her dispensation. The principles she lived by, how she dressed, is universal rules that apply equally today. That's what they would say. We say she dressed according to her dispensation, but we mean both. She dressed according to her dispensation, the way she wore dresses and skirts, but she also did not dress according to the fashion of her dispensation. She did not wear hoop skirts. She did not wear corsets. She did not wear a lot of lace. She didn't take part in all of those fashions. And she advocated a reform dress that was strange for her time. We can all see how both are correct. FFA is wrong because they'll only take one part. But if we only take this part, we're equally wrong, yes? So in here, we see both. Anything else we do that with? The problem is that through this year we've been teaching this because people have been so fixated on this side. They've been so fixated that we have to wear skirts and dress according to the rules that she lays out for her time, that when we come to this side, we tend to just erase all of this, like it doesn't exist. So we say all this year, Jerry Falwell and conservatives. And FFA says, no, it's the papacy and all those liberals. And in having to reteach ourselves about conservative America and Protestant America, we've just wiped out this side, and we've wiped out the role of papacy in end-time prophecy. This is what I mean by juggling two concepts at the same time. Seem contradictory or not. We've had to work so hard to get people to see this side because we've been blind to it by last year for about 28, 29 years. People need re-educating. They think liberals are the bad guys. We have to reteach to them about conservatism. But in coming over to this side, we start erasing what we had no right to. So we start saying that just because the Sunday law is a combination of both histories, that somehow then it's only Protestantism. And when you see the involvement of the papacy, 1 + 2 = 3, if the papacy is involved, is the papacy involved here? Yes, still relevant. We need to have a very good reason to discount great controversy, because it's great controversy plus early writings. So coming back to our quote, the influence of Rome is far from destroyed, and prophecy foretells a restoration of the power of the papacy. We can all see that. And that is separate and distinct to Protestantism, because nowhere you will find her speaking, Revelation speaking, anywhere speaking as Protestantism being resurrected, because Protestantism never died. Can we all see that? My brother.
Yeah.
Sorry?
It is correct. Protestantism has never died. No one can argue that. But what confused me is that when the way Sister White understood that beast, I don't think whether it is the same way, because for us we don't call papacy to be beast. I think you agree with that. So and when we say the beast is going to restore,
What died in 1798?
what died is that, okay, in real sense what happened is
98 to 99. 98 to 99, that history.
1998, 1798. What I know that is the separation of church and state. That is what that looks like. But it's not that the church has closed or something.
So he who leads into captivity will go into captivity, yes? He who kills by the sword is killed by the sword. So who went into captivity? The kings of Europe didn't go into captivity, the papacy did, the Pope did. The church that was hit there. Might have been a part of church and state, a loss of state power. It's the Pope that went into captivity, not the kings. So who comes out of captivity? Not a state.
So, which means policy is a beast, right?
No.
Then, how are you saying it's going to raise when it's not a beast?
You want to separate the woman and the beast?
Yeah, because
They're riding like one entity.
what the policy we are talking about is not the church and state, it's the church itself, right? Which we are talking, which is a separate Catholic church. And that is what we are denying. We are saying that one is not a beast.
I never said it was the beast. It doesn't have to be the beast, does it? What received the deadly wound?
That is,
In the history, what received the deadly wound? If you can't answer that, you can't tell me what came out of captivity. If you can't tell me what received the deadly wound, you can't tell me what wound is healed. Anyone else? My brother. It's not in the great controversy. It was not complicated a year ago. It's complicated because you've all bought into this. And you've started erasing things that we had no right to erase.
My understanding of DC 578 is that in Europe, the papacy is going to bring together church and state. In the new world, that is the United States, it's Protestantism that bringing together church and state. However, the papacy and the Protestants are not working. Okay, they are not working at the same time. Protestantism takes the lead. Okay, it first brings church and state together in the United States, and it's like it's going to instruct the papacy to do the same thing in the old world. Because we have this principle that says first the United States, then the rest of the world.
How do you say that it instructs the papacy to do that in the rest of the world?
For sure, I don't know, but that's how I understand. That's how I understand what is the words of Ellen G. White.
Then you could tell me how you read that in the words, because I don't read that in the words.
It's like,
Protestantism does not tell the papacy
it's like
to bring church and state together. There's nowhere in the paragraph that says that. Yeah, what type of Catholic? Does he support Pope Francis?
No, it's like he's trying to force it. Of course, the same work he had done in the United States.
Then the
he's now
papacy,
trying to do in Europe.
then the papacy does not have a restoration of her power. She has no power. She comes under conservative America. So you don't believe that the papacy has a restoration of her power. Her wound is not healed.
He's healed in the old world.
No, it's not. Because she's being told what to do by Protestant America. She has no power. That's what you're saying. So that's what you're saying. If it takes Trump to tell a liberal pope what to do, then Francis has no power. No, he's not. He's dictating him what to do. Dictatorship does not mean power. If I told you that you were to wash everyone's clothes today, you didn't get a choice in that and you didn't want to, and I said, I'm going to tell you to do that and you have to do that, I'm not empowering you. I'm giving you no power.
I don't see that as empowering me, but as I do it, I'll appreciate what you have done. That I'm benefiting.
So as Donald Trump tells the papacy, a liberal papacy, that it's to enact conservative laws that go against everything they believe in, somehow in doing that work they'll feel, this empowers me, this makes me feel good. I kind of wanted this all along.
Yeah, it's like I wanted this, but there was no way I could get it. So now that...
So if I have a slave and I tell them to work the garden and they're halfway through working the garden and they feel, you know what, this isn't so bad, I'm kind of enjoying this. Then you think that's a restoration of their power. I think that's crazy. Does anyone else agree with him? No one is receiving power if they're being controlled by an entity they don't believe in. And separate and distinct to that, my problem with what most of you are saying is that you're reading the quotes according to what you want to see. You're acting like newspaper prophets. Seriously, this is newspaper prophets. Because you can't see a liberal pope and a conservative Trump working together. You're going into clear quotes and rewriting them in your own words in ways that do not make sense. My brother.
Yes, if we are honest to the reading of the quote is telling us that the power of privacy is going to be destroyed by. And if we read carefully, is that the nation that once acknowledged our power are going to return back, or they're going to be controlled again. So the nation that once acknowledged our power are the nation in Europe. So when the Sunday law is decreed in the United States by the Protestantism, then the same thing will be followed by the nations that has one being under the control of the church.
Not just Europe, most of Southern America, still under papal control. Much of Africa. Eastern Europe. I don't want us to think it's just somehow France and Germany. It's much more global than that. But I get your point. Anyone else? My brother.
Okay, I need to ask some questions. How does it receive power? And in which way was that the ruling was given?
What does that change about this story? Because we don't need to know what it looks like to know what the quote's telling us happens.
No, we need to understand this to understand the one.
Prophecy comes first. Prophecy tells us what's going to happen, And then we can wonder what that looks like.
But what you're saying now, the thing are complicated because we're not coming to conclusion. You need to understand how.
I have a
purpose
conclusion.
the power, the daily living. And how is that power going to be restored back?
I have a conclusion.
But now we are not coming to argument.
No, because people won't read the quote. Because they want to know what it looks like and see it in a newspaper before they can accept the quote.
Wait, how can leper like this, the past this, receive the power when the lamb like this is going to speak as dragon? This is what I'm asking you.
Sorry?
How can a leper like this receive the power when the lamb like this is going to speak as dragon? In which way?
Because they're separate and distinct.
And you are saying that this is now conservative and this is liberal.
I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. You know Francis is a liberal, and you know Trump is a conservative. Not saying that. And you know that this is what the quotes tell us.
Then how can they come in agreement?
What takes precedence? What takes precedence?
What do you mean?
What dictates to you what is right and wrong?
Yeah.
Yes. What you see or what the quotes tell you?
What I'm saying and what telling me are the same.
So if you read a newspaper and you see Trump is a conservative and Francis is a liberal, even if the quotes tell you that Francis is going to have power, if you can't see it in the newspaper, you won't believe it.
Mine not the newspaper, I'm seeing the Bible, Revelation 13.
This is what the Bible tells you.
Revelation 13 tells me clearly that the leper...
Great controversy tells you this.
No. The leper like this has no power in this end time prophecy. Only the lamb like this is the one...
It doesn't say that. It doesn't say that. It says it's wounded, 1798, and then it's healed.
What made you to have the life, to be healed? Or what is our life back? It's true, the leper like this.
The leopard-like beast has a wound.
It's true, the lamb like this. That is
The leopard-like beast has a wound. That wound is healed.
who will heal him?
It's irrelevant. You go to the Great Controversy and it'll tell you what is healed. It's the papacy.
This is what we need to harmonize. In that thing, I cannot see
Harmonize what?
the healing of that leper like this and the work of the lamb like this.
Then you're going back to a newspaper.
No newspaper, even in the Bible.
You are, because you're looking at this and saying conservative.
Let's put aside the newspaper.
You're looking at this and saying conservative. If it was a liberal president right now, you wouldn't be asking that question.
Not because of that. That's what Bible tells me.
No, if there was a liberal president right now, you wouldn't be asking that question. You'd be saying, who's going to give Francis his power? Well, it's clear. The liberal president is going to give him his power. But the newspapers are tripping you.
Not because of that. The only thing, my problem is healing. The healing of the leper like
I don't care how it gets healed. I want to know what gets healed.
How can I understand it?
Through the quote.
No.
You want to put your finger in Christ's side and feel around for some
In the
flesh.
Bible, I cannot understand it like that.
Why?
This is how I read it.
When she says that Rome still has influence in the countries that once acknowledged her dominion, and prophecy foretells a restoration of the power of Rome. Can you see, regardless of what it looks like or who gives it, that it's the papacy whose wound is healed?
Yeah, I understand that the power of the shepherd is going to restore when the leper like this, when the lamb like this is going to speak as dragon. This is how I understand it.
It went into captivity, yes? When does Adventism come out of captivity? Because we were in captivity. Why? Why do you say that?
Because the European nation, or European movement,
When do we go to work? When does Ellen White say we go to work?
we work with that.
Sorry?
We work with that. The what?
Sorry, I couldn't. Too many people talking at once. When does Ellen White say we go to work?
This is what I'm saying. We work with that.
Which type of work you do?
Ellen White only has one type of work.
I don't know. How can I answer it?
So Ellen White will tell you. When does she say we go to work at the end of the world?
For me, I don't know the work she's talking about.
There's only one type of work she's talking about, and that is sharing the gospel. So when does Ellen White say we'll share the gospel? When does Ellen White say we will share the gospel to the world? That's fine. When does she say in 1888 we'll take the gospel to the world?
When Sunday law is going to be
Sunday law.
Yeah.
So Ellen White says we're going to go to work at Sunday law.
Yeah, the big gospel of the world.
That's the ultimate goal. She'll just say Sunday law. So we see captivity, and then we know Sunday law, we go to work. And now we understand that that is a process. You want to give 1989. So you look at the papacy and you see Sunday law. That's when the wound is healed. I'm suggesting that our understanding of the papacy is way too primitive. We've got 4 reform lines for our coming out of captivity, and you're saying that the papacy's wound is healed at the Sunday law. That's not a good counterfeit. Anyone else?
The difference of counterfeit and healing.
Sorry?
Counterfeit and healing are different.
Counterfeit and what?
Healing.
Healing?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're different words. I don't understand your meaning.
I said that counterfeit and the healing of the papacy are different.
The papacy is what to us?
Papacy is counterfeiting the true line.
So the papacy is a counterfeit of this movement. And you want to see that we have all of these histories of restoration prior to the Sunday law when we go to work. And then you understand the papacy is a counterfeit of that. So when the papacy's wound is healed at the Sunday law, it has all the history of that healing before it.
Yeah, but I don't see that papacy itself is the one to restore itself, but it's the work of protection.
Who restores us?
It's us ourselves.
Sorry?
It's us ourselves.
So who restores the papacy?
Protestantism.
That's not using parable teaching. Who restores us? Our boss? And we restore ourselves. Counterfeit that. Compare and contrast. Who restores the papacy?
The boss.
The boss, and they do that themselves.
Daughters.
That's breaking the rules of parable teaching. That's the reason we're confused. We won't follow rules, either with these quotes or with these applications. Adventism, if we were to just look at the line of Acts 27, we're Adventism, the church is Adventism, they're passed by, we do the work. Adventism gives a message to itself and restores itself. So the papacy, counterfeit that. Compare and contrast. Do we honestly think that Jerry Falwell is restoring the papacy? So you know the newspapers don't agree, but we shouldn't have to do that. I shouldn't have to do that to get a no from you. I should be able to say compare and contrast.
No, what I mean is
we compare and contrast, we see, we give a message. Adventism, through God giving a message, restores internally. So the papacy, not through Protestantism. We're out of time again. I'm really troubled that we can't go to a quote, see 2 sentences that are absolutely clear, and apply that. Because most of the explanations I've heard today cannot be defended on any form of methodology or from any form of inspiration. They've been manipulated from newspapers. We all understood that this Sunday law and the great controversy, Adventism knows that we apply it to our own time, don't we? We apply that Sunday law to our own time. Then we understood the exact nature of that Sunday law, of the sin of the United States has changed. The sin is different in 1850 from the sin in 1888. But even when you see that this is the work of Protestantism and this is the work of Protestantism, when she talks about the healing of the deadly wound and the restoration of papal power, she's keeping that separate and distinct, her own words, from Protestantism. So if it's that way for this history and for this history, it's a direct application of our own. We can see that with modern Israel. Why can't we see that with modern Babylon? This is all without going to the studies that have been taught for 14 months now. All the lines of the counterfeit. World War I, World War II, Fourth Diadochi War, Third Diadochi War. The Battle of Panium in Daniel 11, they all tell you about the restoration of the papacy. And I just want us to know that if we don't see it as the papacy that's resurrected of itself, what you're saying is that you disagree with all of those studies. Third Diadochi War, counterfeit, World War I, and World War II. Which is okay, that's fine, but then you need to justify it. And no one's been able to do that. So if you kneel with me, we'll close in prayer. Dear Father in heaven, thank you for our blessings. You know, Lord, that we are wanting to understand, wanting to know and do your will. Father, we are on the line of the 144,000. Just before us is the Sunday law. I pray, Lord, that you'll give us clarity of this history, of this waymark. We must understand what is coming up in this history, in our own dispensation, the one we're walking through right now, Lord. As we see global events, we see all that is happening within America, we see all that is happening within Europe and South America. Lord, I pray you give us clarity on these issues. May we understand how to approach these quotes. May we understand how to interpret prophecy. I pray, Lord, that we'll have unity and that we will, in that unity, be properly prepared for what is about to take place. In Jesus' name, amen.